In a world constantly shifting, where policies spark protest, alliances blur, and truth itself seems up for debate, how do we make sense of the noise and find the stories that truly matter? Well, today's headlines span continents and convictions, reflecting the urgency of our times and the delicate balance between power, people, and principle. From geopolitical development to domestic decisions with ripple effects, we are tracking the movement, shaping both global and local narratives. It is not just about what is happening. It is about what it means. This is Flash News on ABC Amba TV. I am Star Smart. Let's begin. Well, as the sun rose over St. Peter's Square, tens of thousands of faithful Catholics gathered not just to receive a blessing, but to witness history being made. Pope Leo XV, the newly elected leader of the Catholic Church, delivered a poignant and powerfully worded message of peace. In his first Sunday appearance, one that reverberated far beyond the cobblestone streets of Vatican City, we see that with a soft but commanding voice, he called for immediate ceasefires in Ukraine and Gaza, urging political leaders and nations to reject violence in favor of a genuine, just and lasting peace. It was a message soaked in urgency and hope, punctuated by the rhetorical yet soul-stirring question of how many more must die before peace becomes more valuable than pride, in his words. Now, for the first time in living memory, a pope chooses to deliver the Regina Caeli prayer for not just from the apostolic palace windows, but from the very heart of the square, stepping down from symbolic elevation to stand with the people. And just when the crowd thought it couldn't get more surreal, he began to sing parts of the prayer, his voice trembling with spiritual conviction.
Fratelli e sorelle, l'immane tragedia della Seconda Guerra Mondiale terminava 80 anni fa, l'8 maggio, dopo aver causato 60 milioni di vittime. Nell'odierno scenario drammatico di una terza guerra mondiale a pezzi, come più volte ha affermato Papa Francesco, mi rivolgo anch'io ai grandi del mondo, ripetendo l'appello sempre attuale: mai più la guerra! Porto nel mio cuore le sofferenze dell'amato popolo ucraino. Si faccia il possibile per giungere al più presto a una pace autentica, giusta e duratura. Siano liberati tutti i prigionieri e i bambini possano tornare alle proprie famiglie. Mi addolora profondamente quanto accade nella striscia di Gaza. Cessi immediatamente il fuoco. Si presti soccorso umanitario alla stremata popolazione civile e siano liberati tutti gli ostaggi. Ho accolto invece con soddisfazione l'annuncio del cessate il fuoco tra India e Pakistan e auspico che attraverso i prossimi negoziati si possa presto giungere a un accordo durevole. Ma quanti altri conflitti ci sono nel mondo? Affido alla Regina della Pace questo accorato appello, perché sia lei a presentarlo al Signore Gesù per ottenerci il miracolo della pace. Torre de Dodones, Madrid.
Oh, well, you see that the Pope gave a very soul-stirring speech there. Now we wonder if this could be the signal of a more emotionally open and grassroots-centered papacy. While time will tell, the message was clear. War must not be normalized. And while the Vatican called for peace, the world's most powerful nations continued to wrestle with internal and external political storms. We also see away from the papacy how House Republicans push Trump's tax agenda closer to reality. Still in the United States, where legislative energy rarely sleeps, House Republicans have released a pivotal section of former President Donald Trump's long promised tax reform plan. Quietly released late Friday evening, the document signals that Trump's big, beautiful bill, his trademark label, is inching closer to the finish line. The plan includes proposed reductions in corporate tax rates, simplification to individual income tax brackets, and new deductions aimed at supporting working class families and small businesses. Supporters argue that the bill will unleash American productivity, while critics, as always, fear it disproportionately benefits the wealthy. But the bigger question looms: can a tax plan truly be called beautiful if it widens the gap between the rich and the poor? And will it be focused more on helping the rich than the poor? It's another question. Well, what's undeniable is that Trump's allies in Congress are well positioned to pass significant portions of the bill, especially as the 2026 elections loom and party lines tighten. Still under the Trump spotlight, the former president announced over the weekend that he will sign an executive order on Monday aimed at slashing the cost of prescription drugs by what he claims will be a 30% to 80%. Now, this will be the most aggressive action in American history against Big Pharma, as he said. Trump told this to supporters at a Florida rally. Now, the plan invokes the most favored nation clause, which would force the United States pharmaceutical companies to match the lowest prices found in other developed nations. In other words, if Germany pays $50 for insulin, why should Americans pay 300 US dollars? Well, it is a compelling argument and one that puts Big Pharma on the defensive. Stocks for several major pharmaceutical companies dropped significantly just hours after the announcement. Yet critics warn that such sweeping price controls could stifle innovation. They say if you force prices too low, where's the incentive to invent the next miracle cure? Still, for the millions of Americans who ration insulin, skip medications, or go without treatment entirely, the executive order is a ray of hope. But again, the question echoes. In a country as wealthy as the United States, why is life-saving medicine still treated as a luxury item? Well, we see that still in North America, and shifting away from the United States, Mexico border, a diplomatic ripple has sparked controversy on the United States-Mexico border, where the United States has reportedly revoked tourist visas belonging to Marina del Pilar Avila Olmeda, governor of Baja California, and her husband. The Mexican leader confirmed the news herself, calling the decision unjust and unexplained. But why now? Why her? Speculation is rife. Some analysts point to her party's left-leaning stance and growing anti-United States sentiment among certain Mexican lawmakers. Others believe it is part of Washington's broader crackdown on officials suspected of corruption or cartel ties, though no such allegations has been publicly made against Governor Avila. But they wondered, could this be quiet diplomatic retaliation, or is it just an administrative glitch dressed in another drama? Either way, the story raises the question: when visas are used as political tools, who really pays the price? Politicians or the people that they serve? And while tensions quietly simmer along America's southern border, a very different group of migrants is packing up for a northward journey. We see away from Mexico, a look at the unfolding story that is as symbolic as it is rare. A group of white Afrikaner families have begun relocating from South Africa to the United States, citing fear of racial violence and persecution. While in an emotionally charged report aired by journalist Sophie Bukena, families from Pretoria and surrounding areas boarded planes to the United States under what some are calling refugee status. Their claims that post-apartheid South Africa has failed to protect minority citizens from targeted violence and land seizures. Now, critics say it is a distorted narrative meant to garner sympathy, citing that violent crimes affect all South Africans, regardless of race. But for the departing Afrikaners, the move isn't political. For them, it is survival. Oh, while we wait to get that video playing,
today is really the result of a process that started on the 5th of May 2025, where we received an application for the foreign operators permit, which we then forwarded to the International Air Services Council for processing and approval. Basically, the application, it contained a number of categories. One, how many flights? Two, who is being transported? Three, the route that has to be taken by the flight. So in terms of the reason for the flight, what was stated in the application was the fact that the flight is here to transport Afrikaners who are relocating to the US as refugees. So basically that was the reason for the application. So when the application is being processed, there is also the technical aspect of it, which has to be looked into by the CAA, which is what they did, and then taken it to the council, and the permit was approved.
oh, well, there you hear the remark from South Africa's Deputy Minister of International Relations and Cooperation. Well, we wonder the question, can those whose ancestors once held the reins of oppression now claim the mantle of the oppressed? Well, it is quite ironic, and it is a bigger question. But then it is a situation stirring debates on racial identity, historical guilt, and what it truly means to seek asylum. And while that emotional dust swirls, another drama unfolds, this time in the corridors of global power. Still tracking Trump's geopolitical footprints, we see the former president has embarked on a diplomatic sprint through three of the world's wealthiest nations. The United States president has embarked on this trip, and his agenda, trade, tariffs, and a carefully calculated charm offensive. But behind the cameras and handshakes lies another question. What do these countries really want from the United States, and what is Trump prepared to give in return? Well, France wants agricultural concessions. Japan is eyeing military support. Germany seeks tariff reliefs on its car industry. Each country arrives at the negotiating table not as a guest, but as an eager bidder, hoping for a slice of America's economic favor. And in a surprising twist, Trump's controversial tariff strategy, once mocked as reckless, is beginning to make strategic sense. With China's economy slowing and Western demand rising, America's aggressive tariffs have allowed Trump to pressure trading partners while protecting key United States industries. Steel is rebounding. Agriculture subsidies are stabilizing rural communities. Could it be that the America First strategy wasn't as impulsive as critics have made us believe? Well, the new mantra emerging from these talks seems to be protectionism, when used with precision, is not isolation, but negotiation with leverage. Still, questions remain. At what cost to diplomacy? At what cost to global trust? Only time will tell if Trump's economic gambit becomes a lasting legacy or a cautionary tale. Well, we see that the United States-China trade talks, with Trump gabbling finally making sense. His global trade, which will shift to what many once called his most volatile battlefield, China. For years, His administration faced harsh criticism for its aggressive tariff war with Beijing. Critics scoffed, economists warned, allies panicked. But now, as top United States officials return from the latest round of trade negotiations, there is a new phase and a new phrase on everyone's lips. Substantial progress. A deal, they say, is finally within reach. Behind closed doors in Beijing, negotiators hammered out tentative agreements on intellectual property theft, currency manipulation, and agricultural imports. Chinese officials agreed to increase purchases of American soybeans, corn, and poultry, something unthinkable just a year ago. We wonder what really changed. Perhaps, just perhaps, the logic behind Trump's risky strategy is revealing itself. By imposing tariffs and threatening war, apparently he forced China back to the negotiation table. By taking economic hits early, he bet on long-term leverage. Was he playing checkers or chess all along? Well, the irony is very thick. The same play and plan, once branded as dangerous, is now being called decisive. Whether this will solidify into a historic agreement or unravel in the final hours remains uncertain. But one thing is clear, Trump's economic nationality sets its economic house in order. The flames of war continue to cast long shadows across Europe and, of course, the Middle East. Oh, well, as the United States sets its economic house in order, we see the flames of war continuing to cast these long shadows. But take a look at Poland. Poland away from Asia and back to Europe, where the ghosts of Cold War espionage have returned to haunt Warsaw. Polish officials revealed on Sunday that the massive fire that devastated the Mirowilska 44 shopping center last year was not an accident. It was an act of arson allegedly ordered by Russian intelligence. The timing of the announcement is chilling. One day before the fire's one-year anniversary. Why now is the question. What purpose could Russia have in burning a shopping center as alleged? Well, according to Poland's internal security agency, the fire was meant to sow fear, disrupt Poland's growing economy, and test the country's crisis response. It is a psychological warfare through civilian disruption, a subtle but potent form of sabotage. But does it stop a fire is the question, and does it stop at just this fire? Or is this just the beginning of a new kind of conflict? Russia, of course, denies any involvement of these allegations, but the geopolitical messaging is unmistakable in this chessboard of global influence. Every move counts, and when flames rise from shopping districts rather than battlefields, it forces us to ask, is the war of the future already here, hiding in plain sight? As Europe grapples with such invisible threats, Israel prepares for visible ones, this time from the southern tip of the Arabian Peninsula. Moving to the Middle East, where ceasefires are rarely simple and alliances even less so. Tensions are rising again as the Israeli military has issued evacuation warnings for 3 ports in Yemen. The move comes just days after the United States brokered a ceasefire deal with Houthi rebels, one that notably excludes Israel. The timing, Israel argues, is suspicious. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu released a stern statement saying Israel would defend itself by itself. And more than rhetoric, the Israeli Navy and Air Force have gone on heightened alert. But what happens when a ceasefire for some leaves others exposed? Adding another layer of urgency, we see Hamas has just announced it will imminently release Eden Alexander, the last known living American-Israeli hostage in Gaza. Well, the news is both hopeful and strategic, but Israel remains firm. There has been no agreement with Hamas, no ceasefire, no prisoner swap. Well, Netanyahu clarified Israel has not agreed to any ceasefire or prisoner swap with Hamas ahead of the expected release of Israeli-American soldier Eden Alexander. Well, we are continuing preparations to intensify the war in Gaza, were his words. It is a sobering reminder that even gestures of mercy can be wrapped in military calculations. While much of the world accuses Israel of disproportionate response, the Israeli position remains that of preemptive self-defense against a terror group operating from civilian cover. And while images from Gaza stir global outrage, Israeli officials ask, what would you do if rockets fell on your children's schools? If tunnels ran under your home? In the end, balance demands we ask hard questions on both sides and acknowledge that peace is rarely pure and war is never simple. Well, turning point or tactical move, still in Gaza, we wonder, but with a glimmer of hope, human hope at that. Hamas has announced its intention to release Eden Alexander, the last known living American, according to reports. Hostages held in the region. For months, his name has echoed in diplomatic corridors and among grieving families across Israel and the United States. Now the possibility of his freedom sends ripples through an otherwise bleak landscape. But what is the motive for Hamas behind this decision? Is this a sign of goodwill, a strategic ploy for sympathy, or is this an attempt to manipulate global opinion? Well, many analysts argue that this release is not charity, that it is calculation, with increasing pressure from Western nations and growing calls for ceasefires. Hamas may be attempting to regain control of the narrative. After all, when you're branded as a terrorist group globally, every act of mercy can be weaponized as propaganda. Meanwhile, Israeli official remains unmoved. Prime Minister Netanyahu reaffirmed Israel's position bluntly that there was no agreement with Hamas, no ceasefire, prisoner swap, and they are continuing preparations to intensify the war on Gaza. Israel insists it cannot negotiate with a group that uses civilians as shields and whose charter includes the destruction of the Jewish state. And while many around the world plead for restraint, the Israeli question remains, how do you make peace with a group whose ideology denies your rights to exist? Eden's release, should it occur, may bring a moment of joy, but not necessarily peace. It might just be the calm before another storm. And as Gaza simmers, the world's attention shifts back to a different kind of battlefield, the global political stage, where South Africa now holds a seat at the head of the table. Away from the wars around the globe, we see that into the world of high diplomacy, Africa's voice is gaining global weight. This morning, South Africa's Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Roland Lamola, is expected to brief the media on the nation's role as the current chair of the G20. It is a big moment for Pretoria and a symbolic one for the entire African continent. Now, why does this matter now even more? As economic power begins to shift away from traditional Western hegemony, Africa, once treated as a geopolitical afterthought, is becoming central to global strategy. From rare earth minerals to renewable energy opportunities, we see that Africa is no longer just a recipient of policy. It is a maker of it. Under President Ramaphosa's leadership, South Africa has also championed the expansion of BRICS, aligning with Brazil, Russia, India, and China to counterbalance Western economic influence. The message is clear that Africa wants equity, not charity, partnership, and not patronage. But here is a question that lingers. Will Africa's rise on the world stage be embraced, or will it be resisted? Well, Lamola is expected to speak on G20 priorities, including global debt relief and equitable vaccine distributions, as well as conflict resolutions in regions like Sudan and the Sahel. Well, the irony is quite compelling. A continent that was once divided by colonial power now leads discussions on unity, development, and peace. Well, South Africa's moment at the G20 podium is more than ceremonial. It is historical. And as the world listens, one must ask, is the global order finally ready to hear Africa's voice, not as a whisper, but as a command? We can only hope that the answer is yes. But then as we wrap up today's edition of Flash News, we've seen that from papal blessings in Rome to power plays in Beijing, From visa revocations in Mexico to hostage diplomacy in Gaza, the world indeed is spinning fast, and each headline tells a deeper story of ambition, ideology, and survival, leaving the question, in this turbulent global moment, who is truly writing history and whose voice will echo loudest when the dust settles? Well, that brings us to the end of the Flash News for today. For deeper perspective and fearless storytelling on issues from the home front, be sure to catch Undaunted tonight at 8 p.m. Amba time. Until next time, I remain Star Smart. Thank you for joining in on the Flash News. We'll leave you with ABC Amba TV images. Have a good day.